We actually had 3 old 17th century buildings to deal with. This is one of the platforms we found. We converted it into and reskinned it to put in a F&B function here. Hi everyone. Thank you for giving me your time and being here to listen to me. I think it's going to be a little bit of an overdose after Hirenbhai. And like he said, he's out about 35 years of practice and he had so many anecdotes to kind of share today, very powerful wisdom. Before I start, I actually want to really acknowledge, there are a whole bunch of people who we work with. Of course, our studio team, collaborators, consultants, engineers, and vendors, artisans. You'll see that as part of our projects. And we've been very fortunate, I would say, like what Hirenbhai was pointing to. Somehow, we are very thankful to our clients who've given us the opportunity to see what you're going to see today, what we've been able to create with them. And so I represent a studio out of Delhi called Studio Lotus. We are also about 110 people. And so we are in the 24th year of our practice. And I really want to talk about how we've gotten here. What is it that drives us? We've been navigating projects through our journey of different scales, typologies, and there's a lot of change that we are constantly experiencing. And we even today, I would say we are like a work in progress. That's how we like to call our studio. We're always uneasy. We're excited about new work that comes our way, but there is that unsteadiness that we embrace day to day. So I want to really talk about, and lean into why we do what we do and how we do it, which I think a lot of the questions that came up in the audience, it should be of great interest. So, I mean, a lot of you are going to build practices and some of you are already running practices. So, there is a certain way we shape our practice and it kind of responds to the clients that you get, the typologies you get to work on and budgets and, all kinds of challenges that you have faced as a practitioner. But what is it that does not change is what I want to bring your attention to. And for us, it's been, like a personal expression that you always try to find in your practice. We've come to discover that for us, it's a lot about the values and a lot about the design pursuits that we've taken up over the last years of practice. So, it kind of informs how we work in the studio, the decisions we kind of take on our projects. And to that degree, we've been shaping our practice on this belief of the values and the framework that guides us. And in some way, we've kind of built a vocabulary between ourselves, which we call guiding principles, which allows for people to work together as a collective. And in our own small way, we're trying to kind of build this as a collective movement. And that's the idea of the core practice. And, it's been shaping us and our work over the last many years. And it is something that's going to continue. That's a strong belief that we work towards. I'm going to spell out a few of these queries and inquiries that we've been into. So one of the things that ever since that we started the practice, we've been pursuing this idea of, the country that we come from, frugality is really something that we've always had. And how does one work with frugality? How do you do more with less? How do you kind of build in a way that keeps the handmade relevant, which in our country is one of the most, we are very fortunate to really have that skill available. We've always kind of embraced low tech. So how do we embrace solutions which are easy to organize, easy to create and make them relevant, accessible to a larger audience? looking beyond, there's an embedded footprint that goes into any built structure. So we've been really questioning the idea of carbon footprint. And one of our key interest areas is adaptive reuse. So how do you kind of revitalize the structure, bring it back to life, repurpose it? A lot of our clients, and one of the things, of course, which Hiren Bhai also spoke about, is this idea of timelessness, and we explore it in our projects. We try and push it to kind of build a new aspiration and take it into the future. A lot of our clients, like I was saying, are HNI and luxury brands. So we've always tried to use this opportunity to create a new sense of aspiration and build a new definition or a new way of looking at luxury in our work, which I'll try and demonstrate through some of the projects. So, elevating craftsmanship, taking it to a level where it kind of builds a layer for this conversation around luxury. And the last thing is, like obviously weaving our work in a way where there's a sense of poetry, something that's inspirational for us as well as the people that we are building for. So these are the key kind of pursuits that we build on. And I'm trying to today take a few examples. It's a little long drawn kind of presentation, I think. So if at any point you want to ask me to shut down, and we'll do that. But I've probably been a little ambitious with today's presentation. So I'm going to first take up these 3 projects. And I've collected the set of projects I'm presenting today in 3 clusters. So the first narrative that I'm walking you through is a collective of 3 explorations that we've done for a hotel brand. And we've looked at this idea of redefining luxury using the local and the regional and building a narrative with it. There are these 3 projects are located in different sites and contexts. I'm going to start with the first one, where we had this, the first opportunity that came was in Jodhpur. What you see on the left on the screen is the site that we'd got, and it's in the heart of the Jodhpur town, in the old town of Jodhpur. We actually had 3 old 17th century buildings to deal with. So that's the manner in which you access the site. And a lot of you, some of you might have seen this project. We often celebrated this project. It still kind of gives us joy to what it's brought to our work and the learnings it's given us. So I'm taking off from here. And that's the gate that it brings you to through the lanes. That's the way we found the site. It was actually these 3 old buildings which had been occupied by many families. They were living there, using it in their own ways. And that's the section which kind of defines the position of the site. So we've really celebrated the Mehrangarh Fort in the property's experience. And our main site plan actually is devised so that the 3 buildings become our jewels for the site. The whole hotel experience is built around that. There's a large central courtyard that we've created, which allows for the new buildings to come in. So there are 3 blocks which we placed on the site and retained the old structures. Now for the old structures, we slowly kind of started peeling off layers of old plaster and revealing the structures, paint and plaster, removed all the arbitrary construction that had happened over the years. And it basically started pulling the fort into the premise. So these masonry walls were like revealing the jewel-like form of these historic buildings, and the connection became deeper to the fort. Just a very quick glimpse of how we kind of then transformed the rest of the site with it. Our first block that we put in as a new insert is actually like a giant gateway. It's a second gate that brings you into the courtyard of the property. That's the courtyard and how you experience it, and over time the landscape is now taken over. And for the new builds, we basically went back to this idea of the traditional vernacular architecture that kind of responds to the climatic condition of Rajasthan. And the idea was to create a thermal mass that takes care of a glass box inside it. All our verandas are completely naturally ventilated. The only place that you find refuge or is conditioned is inside the rooms. And to create this thermal mass, we had to actually deal with the western sun because the fort sits on the western side of the site. And we had to devise something that would allow us views of the fort as well as shield the building from the harsh sun and the winds. We designed this double skin structure that kind of naturally ventilates the balconies and the corridors around the structure. We started with explorations of the jali, how we go about it, to make the most amount of kind of use of handmade techniques. We started working with different thicknesses of stone, and one of the constraints was to open a large span of wall surface in front of the balconies. So we had to bring the stone thickness down to 20 millimeter. So we started working towards simplifying the workmanship that was required on the stone. We reduced the motifs to a very simple geometry, which responded to the way it allowed for the daylight to penetrate inside. And what it also did was it brought in this handcrafted layer, which otherwise we would have had to go to a water jet cutting solution, which was not something that we wanted for the project. And this simplified pattern kind of then plays with the manner in which light enters the site. This is just a small demonstration of how the window system works. So it's about a 450 kilo setup of stone, which we've engineered on a very light metal frame, which clamps down the stone and then design the hardware around it. And the building, starts becoming a playful space where the guests come and open the windows. It animates the building through the day. In the night, it lights up like a lantern. And then we took that story forward. We worked with partitioning systems within the building, which are 50 millimeter stone. All of them have been hand raised. We gave it like a canvas to craftsmen to play with. And we worked with them to just come up with some motifs which would work for us. And different devices were created using that. So this is just one of the elements in the rooms where the partition walls between the bathrooms and the rooms are again a stone partition with a sliding door kind of built into it, and you can see the texture of the stone. And we took that to the headboard as well. So in some sense, this started our journey of creating a dialogue between what existed, what was old, and how do you kind of play with the new. The next, one of the key learnings that, again, Hirenbhai spoke about authenticity. We really saw this very clearly, this idea of, working with the place in an authentic way, engaging with the people and the skills available, and something that kind of allows for people to embrace it and take it up as their own. And the other learning we had was, moving beyond constraints of our own understanding and the drawing board, and allowing for a process, designing a process that allows for buildings to evolve, and really using the wisdom of artisans, craftsmen, to infuse their sense of innovation and build a sense of collective stakeholders who would hold the project together as it evolves. Another example, now I'm taking you to a totally different context. It's a hotel that that's under construction right now. That it's in Dharamshala, the home of Dalai Lama up in the Himalayas, and it's a beautiful site. It's got spectacular views of the Dhauladhar on one side, and it oversees the tea gardens on the other. And what we proposed, actually, we moved away from a traditional model of creating cottages and connected spaces. We kind of pushed this idea of taking one cottage, which would be extruded across a 220 meter long building, and allowing for no corridors to kind of cut off the view. So the rooms open up actually on the tea garden side on one end, and on the other side they're looking at the Dauladar. And each room, what you see here marked in red, are vertical circulation passages which take you from a common shared corridor at the lower level. So the middle level is a public space which allows for movement, and each room is accessed using your own private staircase. So that's how you go up to your room. And for the main architectural expression, we've taken two inspirations. One is because we wanted to kind of contextualize the building in the vicinity that it sits in. So one idea that we picked up is this quiet rhythm of a monastery and built on that. And the other idea that we've kind of drawn from is the actual Himachali architecture. So the Katkuni architecture starts playing a role. What we did was we took a lot of the slate waste which you find in this area from the local quarries, work with the villagers to procure it, and we've created these large thermal walls, which are, so in this case we actually took Rajasthani masons to help the Himachali masons kind of, because that's a skill that's not getting revived anymore. There are not that many buildings which are coming up in the Katkuni style construction in the Himachal region. So they our Rajasthan stone partners who had worked with us on the previous project kind of came in and they helped hone the skills of the local guys. And then, you know, this 200 meter thick masonry wall actually becomes a great thermal mass which allows for the solar powered floor heating to work, radiant heating to work really well. And it creates a sense of rhythm and timeless experience that sits really well in the mountains against the backdrop of the Dauladar. So this was also a learning point for us, which allowed us to deeply connect with the materials and the local skills and the setting. And it kind of spoke to our aspiration of an expression that sits in the contemporary and extends what's existed in the past. The third project is in a, again coming back to Rajasthan, this is for the same client, but it's in a very different context. So this is on a 800-acre private forest, which had this 200-year-old dam, and there was a running property on the site. They were already running a 12-tented property, but it was not perennial. They used to kind of pull it down, and our client wanted a solution which would become a perennial hotel. The business model wasn't working in that sense. So what we came up with was this long linear, curvilinear kind of built mass, which sits on the dam. And there's an amenity block building that's been created next to the room block. The section shows you how we perched the building on the dam. So we had to come up with a very lightweight structure, which allowed us to put it on this man-made dam. We worked with a very simple solution of Hume pipes. So our foundations are all Hume pipes poured with cast Hume pipes, which are then filled with stone and rubble and lime to hold the structural foundations of the structure that we wanting to put in. It's a light metal structure, and we had to move very quickly on it. We had just 8 months to build this base building. So this is actually at the 5th month we had already gotten to this point where we had managed to create a covering. So the covering is using a fabric layer with skylights built into it, and that's how the building sits, perched up when you look back from the lake. And what we've done is we've actually, in the section it was visible, we created a sunken walkway for service and your arrival experience into the rooms, which again in this case allows you to look back on both ends of the rooms. So the rooms are on one side looking at the lake, on the other side they look back into the forest that you've kind of come to the site from. And that's your arrival experience in the room, which kind of gives you a direct line of sight into the lake. Now for the interiors of the tents, we wanted to bring in this connect with the block printing technique that exists in that area, and also draw from the flora and fauna. So we worked with the textile designer from a printmaker from who she's studied from RISD. Her name is Dhwani. She spent a lot of time in that region, went out, made a lot of drawings, came back with her drawings. And then we started working with her on, she handcrafted these wooden blocks. And these are massive, large screen prints that she's done, which have been then reinterpreted. She's embellished them with layers of bird motifs, which are also embroidered. And then we've taken that story forward into other elements of this. So, for example, we built the air conditioning unit. So the entire property is using these floor standing air conditioning units. So these are crafted using the same technique into timber. And that's a glimpse of how the room comes together. You can see the skylight, it's pulling in the winter sun. And that's again how the experience of the room is. Now coming to the public building, which sits on the right edge of the dam, on another edge of the dam, is a pavilion that we've taken inspiration from a traditional baradari structure that you see in Rajasthan. But we've looked at a very different way of construction. It's a dry construction using metal and stone. It's fully created using a base structure in metal. And the stone and metal kind of get integrated to create this light porous building, and all the stone is again locally sourced. It's a Chittor sandstone, which you can see here, and all the stone is then hand dressed in places where you would touch and feel it. So all the columns have been meticulously crafted by the people working on it. We've taken this idea of the motifs further, so the same artworks have been then transferred onto the stone panels inside the space. And this pavilion is the heart of the property. That's the pool on one side. So in the evenings, the bar, the restaurant, everything is in this pavilion. This is also your arrival experience. It's a reception. And the veranda kind of on one inner edge spills onto the pool. There's a small film that gives you a sense of being on the site. I'll just run that. And put up the sound. Okay, so I'm now going to jump onto a different idea of what I was talking about, the adaptive reuse bit, where I've taken two examples. The first example is this, it's in an urban setting. It's a project that we were fortunate enough to work on. I believe it is one of the most interesting new developments that has come up. It's in Vikhroli, and the clients already had a vision for the project. They called us in when they had some broad framework worked out, and we worked on this mixed-use project for about 8 to 10 years, and we've done few buildings and added to the master plan. This is how we found the site. There were a lot of silos and old kind of generator buildings, boiler platforms. So it was part of a glycerin plant and many other actually amenities around this. This land was being repurposed. It was now being converted into a mixed-use residential and commercial master plan. There was already a large thought put together, and we kind of built on it. So I'm starting with this first intervention where we started. Our idea was to look at weaving in a narrative that allows for residents to experience what existed on the site. And we worked on I think the first part was just a 2-acre or even 1.5-acre small master plan that we developed, which was a sense of entry and an example of what the development could take up. So there was an amphitheater, we activated 2 buildings, and this little central structure that you see on the right hand side drawing is, we found it as a skeletal structure for a boiler which we developed. And we used the old chimney, and these structures are quite visible from the Eastern Highway, so we used them as a marker to create a gateway to this property and lure in the and for the building itself, then we started looking at how to reinterpret what the building had. So the louvers were reinterpreted with cotton steel. We brought in cotton steel to, cotton steel bleeds over concrete. So the idea was to create something that leaves a sense of aging as they kind of sit in the property. And the louvers themselves are perforated. There are a lot of these large trees on the site which bring in this dapple light. So we've kind of taken that as an inspiration, and the entire pavilion, which is used as this building is used as a marketing office. So through the day you get this dapple light coming through, and that's how plaza was coming together. We've used some of the silos to build narratives for the Godrej group. This is part of the Godrej Properties Limited's development. So the headquarter office is also here. This is one of the platforms we found. We converted it into and reskinned it to put in a F&B function here. So these spaces then activate the central plaza. It becomes like a vibrant hub with F&B created in it, and they started activating the plaza. This was right at the point where they started marketing the project. And then over the years, it's been evolving. We've changed this area now. We've added a few more F&B experiences. This is it's like a beer garden. So they have a brewery and extended F&B experience, which naturally kind of ties back to the larger master plan and blends into the landscape. Those elements that we started with slowly start getting built in. And that was a residential clubhouse, which again takes the same narrative forward. So the building essentially is just one large spanning roof plate, which ties multiple fragmented structures together, which allows for the residents to use different amenities within it. And we've also, at the master plan level, there are edges of this which open up to the main central spine and the public experience. And that brings me to the last project, or the last building that we've done. What you see marked as number 3 in the center of the garden is actually a building that's activated for, again, a public experience. So the idea was to situate a building in this new garden that they were building as a heart of the property, and it kind of connects to all the functions that have been planned in the mixed use. And we worked with Cornerfield office to develop and kind of sync the building into the landscape that they were proposing. So JCFO was brought in by the clients to just look at this particular garden. It's of great importance in terms of the way they're planning the experience of this. This is going to be a calling. We laid them on the floor, and it kind of becomes a new watering hole for the city. And the third section is more about, like looking at how we build. And we've been doing a lot of exploration with the construction techniques that we use to build. I'm starting with this first project, which is underway right now. This is all the way near Jhiling. It's in Uttarakhand. And we had this client who's in love with the hills. So he's very engaged with the project. And he wanted to do something very eco-conscious. He had this almost 100-acre land parcel. And the key things that we started addressing the problem with, the site with, was, there's a huge amount of uncontrolled kind of construction going on in the hills. There are lots of landslides. There's a lot of land erosion that's happening. And ironically, there's a huge water shortage in our hills. So what we did, we kind of got together with Akshay Kaul, who's a landscape architect. We started looking at ecological mapping of the site. That was the first thing we started to do as we were developing the master plan. And We studied the waterways of the land. We started positioning our buildings and the way we would map our roads, siting of our 50 villa development that we were looking at, using that as a guiding principle. And then we also, kind of translated all the way into systems that we would use to build our roads. So we've been using all these different techniques to create, instead of using concrete retaining walls, we've used various old traditional techniques to kind of cut down the soil erosion. So all the slope stabilization has been done using those kind of techniques. And then for the water system across the site, we've built about 150 check dams. And what it has done is it's actually completely elevated the water level of the land parcel that we are working on. And then our master plan also takes care of the manner in which we are using the gravity to feed our, so we are storing water for the villa at the higher level, for the lower level at the higher levels, and then so forth for the rest of the development. Even the storm water and all of that has been worked out accordingly. One of the key challenges that we had on the site was most of the site was on these unbuildable slopes. So instead of going with a traditional way of construction, we worked with Manjunath, BL Manjunath, who's based out of Bangalore, and engineered a system, a structural system, which doesn't kind of damage the land as a traditional system would do. And basically it allows us to ensure saving the trees. So it's like a woven metal frame. That's how the building kind of gets perched at the slope, and allowing for all the rainwater to go through. The main house itself uses a traditional, or rather a engineered conventional system, but this multi-layered dry construction ensures that the shell is insulated sufficiently and meets all the passive house benchmarks. And that's the basket weave construction that we came up with. It's a framework with 100 mm pipes. So it's in terms of its weight and the manner in which you handle it, it's really easy to work with. 3-4 people can kind of handle it. So it's a very fast build and relatively easy build without cutting the trees and allowing for the trees at site to be intact. Then finally, for the build itself, the skinning itself, we worked with timber and slate from the local region, making sure that it allows for the screening of the facades from rain and the weather conditions. And the buildings are oriented in a way where we are being able to catch in south sun, create different orientations of the spaces to enjoy the sun in the forest. And then we've added this layer of craft, which again uses the Himachali timber craft, which has been brought on to some parts of the detailing of the house. And that's the manner in which you get the seamless connection between the inside and outside. And the house kind of sits completely encapsulated in the forest, and it tends to disappear in the forest, and that was the intention. So it's really well. Now I'll move to a very different nature of project. We've been working with this Royal Enfield, this cult brand, for a long time. We've done a lot of retail spaces for them. And I'm going to take you to the Royal Enfield headquarter building in Chennai. And we've done many expressions for them. But for this particular building, which is going to be a R&D facility as well as their primary administrative block for this corporate headquarters, the idea was to move really fast. So we've taken on a collaborative approach, and I would say the Royal Enfield team, the engineering team of Royal Enfield, we had a local architect, SN Pingle. All of us came together, and we've created a hybrid kind of construction system, which allows the building to come up really fast. What we've done is we've made sure that the building has a certain authentic expression in terms of the way it uses materials and the way it's engineered. So that's how the building sits on the site. It's actually a L-shaped plot that we had, And what we've done is, so the orientation is, it uses the southern and northern and southern exposure, and allows for the wind to kind of move through the building. And the circulation path that you see around, of course, part of it is for the fire tender movement, but it's also allowing them to do their test rides for the motorcycles. And the main building's approach takes this idea of revealing the structural details of the building. So there's no cladding. We worked with terracotta screens, which are engineered with steel cables across the corridors of the building, which allow for the air to kind of come through. And on the other end, so there are these large corridors and breathing areas, which are also spill out areas. And we've at the plinth level, we worked with stone masonry. We've brought in certain amount of vocabulary using the vernacular vocabulary using the terracotta tiles, as well as the the red oxide doors that you see here. And on the other end, we have these mechanical louvers which open up, which allows the building to breathe through and through. So these are manually operatable louvers. And the campus is punctuated with a series of courtyards, which are also the circulation hubs. And these are completely 100% ventilated areas, which allow for spillover of the office spaces. Most of them are used all through the day. And they also allow us to reduce the amount of lifts that we had to put in the course. And these spaces are comfortable enough for informal spillouts and meetings and all of those activities to move beyond the air-conditioned zones of the building. And then the campus, for the main campus and the interior approach, we've taken a very engineered kind of aesthetic. It's a very Spartan frame that we've created using concrete blocks and the steel of the building. We've the floors are all dewatered concrete floors, and the surfaces are very well engineered. We've used elements like what you can see on the right hand side image, the headlights from the motorcycle, which we've been kind of building on. So we've re-engineered them for a workspace. And one of the asks of the client was to actually have a motorcycle be available to be driven up at any space in the building. So we've created that as well. So all the workspaces allow for a motorcycle to be there. And the last project in this story is we've just kind of finished this project. It's a experience center at the foothills of the Mehrangarh Fort. It's the arrival experience to the Mehrangarh Fort, the main fort. So this is a visitor center. And what we basically tried to do with this building is we've elevated it. It's a naturally ventilated pavilion, which just takes you from a path into this facility and then puts you up at the foothills of the fort. So the intent was to kind of devise a building that could evolve with the program. We've kind of sunken in the main building onto the southern side of the site, where we had a little a valley sort of getting formed naturally on the south side of the entry road. And the building becomes the datum to the fort. And that's how you kind of come up to the fort as you walk through this visitor center. For the main building itself, this was one of the explorations that we pursued here, where we looked at the building as an adaptable system. So, during the course, so the building is just a framework of metal and stone, and it's all dry cladding. Again, we've not used conventional civil gluing systems. So it's all been kind of fixed in a way where it could be dismantled and moved around for a future use. And in fact, while the building was coming up, the program changed. So it allowed us to kind of embrace the program and redesign it as per the requirements as the brief was changing. These are some early kind of explorations as we were building the mock-up. So it is just a 50 millimeter thick, 3 meter tall stone that's been held with metal edge details. And the whole building is just a series of interlocking elements. The lintels, the shells, and even the floors basically allow us to take the rainwater through into the valley, allows for the existing trees to come through. And for the main walkway, we had to create a sun shading device. So we worked with our age-old screens, which have been then reinterpreted by the craftsmen in different motifs, and then dressed, again hand chiseled all the way through to give it some life. And that's how it kind of perches on the edge of the slope. Yeah, so this is a system that we've been exploring, which kind of allows us to stay rooted in the region, but yet respect the idea of circularity, being frugal and looking forward. So I just want to leave you with this thought where, we've come to a realization through our practice that there is a certain limitation to a partner-driven practice. I am now talking about how we are looking at our studio and our organization. And it's limited to the people who are driving it. So the more and more our structures are designed to allow for collaboration and expand our reach, expand the way innovation happens in the studio by pulling in more minds, pulling in collaborators who would work closely with us. That goes all the way from our own teams, our partner or teams which have kind of moved on and set up their own practices. We have a huge network of collaborators that we work with in that manner. Of course, all the consultants and specialists who come on board are artists, craftsmen. So that's been a huge learning, and we are constantly designing processes for collaboration more than anything else. And in some way, we've started to look beyond the studio now, more and more, as we look at projects and find ways in harnessing the best for the project and the context of the project. And one of the key things that I think we've now recognized is our strength is not in necessarily creating a vision or kind of holding a single person's vision, but it's more about the capacity to align between the people, the resources, and the place itself that we are working in, and the constraints of the brief that we have. So I just want to share one last project very quickly to illustrate this. I think it kind of states it clearly what I'm talking about, this idea of working with a group of people and expanding. This last project is a government project we got to do for the Odisha government, and that was the brief we were given, and we pushed this opportunity forward and pushed the government to look at an idea where could the building open up to the citizens of Bhubaneswar. And we did that by making sure that the spaces were available for the program that they needed. So we pulled up the building, released the ground plate, opened it up to the public, and we pushed in a lot of functions which would allow for the lower level to start using, becoming a place for public interest. And of course, this layer of identity was very important because it was a state building which had to make a mark on the urban landscape. We drew our inspiration from the locally cut textile. There's again a thermal skin that we've created with brick. We've actually used 3-4 colors of brick from the local soil and used it as a shading device. And it starts creating this graphic expression that celebrates the region. And here you can see the ground floor plate is completely porous, and there are large gardens which allow people to walk through and come into the spaces. These spaces have galleries and workshop spaces, and after office hours, this building kind of opens up to the city. And then we convinced the government to become a patron for craft and engage craftsmen at an architectural scale for the project. We were lucky to find this local architect, Shivanand Bol, who worked with us very closely to take this vision forward. And we also had to let go of, so the brief was very simple, and then we allowed for the artisans to build the program for the kind of craft they were and the narratives they were going to bring in. Most of the narratives are in some way from the landscape and their own stories and mythological stories, which they've been working with. And that's at the scale at which the murals have been created. So at the lower plinth, we worked with a soft stone, the laterite stone, which allows for this handcrafted detail to come up. There are various layers of craft which have been integrated in so there's a buster screen which has been used as partition devices as well as lighting details. And that's the experience of this building from the street. Again, a short film, but this film is more about the experience of the craftsmen, of their experience of working on the project.
We were quite excited, with the quantum of work that would be generated if artisans, if craft and architecture could come together. And I think that has been a big achievement, that this building project could generate work for about 50 artisans for a continuous 6 months. And we actually got, artisans who had stopped working with the traditional skills. We convinced them to come back and to start working again.
जोमाने भी हम सतरे काम करूथिले सेमान भी सेमतिका निर्दिष्ट गोटिए काम भितरे रही कि तांकर चिंताधाराटा से गोटिए भितरे रहितिला निर्दिष्ट मूर्ति बनवारे तांकर चिंताधाराटा सेति भितर सीमित थिला जार फଳରେ एई कामटा कृषि भवन काम करिया परे हम मानकु देखावाला जे प्रकृत रे हमें हम कलाटा को केमतिका अन्य दृष्टि रे भी देखि परिबा.
It's a perfect setting for us where we could bring in artisans and craft. If you talk of farmers and if you talk about people coming from villages to this building, then we want to show them something that's familiar to their environment, and that is where craft comes in.
Yeah, thank you. I think Hiren Bhai brought a lot of humor to his conversation, and I've somehow brought it to a very serious note, but yeah, open to questions and yeah, मैं हिंदी में भी जवाब दे सकता हूँ और गुजराती में भी दे सकता हूँ. So
thank you, Ankur sir, for a wonderful presentation. You have always been inspiration, at least to me and many more youngsters. One thing I would like to know from you is the kind of passion, enthusiasm એ તમે ક્યાંથી લાવો છો અને એવી ટીમ સાથે લઈ આવી. That is what I am looking at. કારણ કે થાકી જાય છે માણસ at that, right? અને same enthusiasm we are seeing. I think 2 decades we are seeing you and same aggression and passion.
So that's why I spoke about, all this work happens on the shoulders of many, many, many people. And I think our enthusiasm comes from taking everybody along and making, so in the studio, we also, and by one of the things that we started doing, like we have a practice of silence. So because that's something, there's just so much distraction today that it doesn't allow you to deep dive into anything. So that's one of the things that we've also taken on. And with every meeting or any session that we run in the studio, there is this method that we brought on the table. And it's open, people are learning, embracing it. Some people like to do it, some don't. But that's one of the things that we have focused on building culture. Culture that brings this excitement, brings this self-awareness to, stay in critical inquiry on everything that you're looking at, asking the questions deep enough. And creating joy in every little thing that we do. So, you know, a lot of times people come in and say कि ये तो मैं तो bathroom कर रहा हूँ, एक छोटा सा bathroom बनाने को दे दिया मुझे, you are doing so much. So we all have this thing of, you know, being in gratitude to whatever little thing, even if I'm given a corner to do, what is the best that I can put in? How do I bring my 100% to it? Yeah.
Thank you.
So for adaptive reuse buildings, so that requires lot of passion and time and research. So I mean, financially, how do you manage to do this kind of projects?
So again, I mean, it's not a simple answer. I would say we are constantly trying to balance where we can charge and where we can't. So for certain kind of projects, we are not profitable, but on an average, we will make sure that the business is running profitably. So I mean, that's as simple as that. There are always projects which don't allow you or don't have the bandwidth, and you are still putting in a lot more time than what it warrants or what it pays back. But yeah, you're always holding the intent as tightly as possible and giving it your best.
But yes, the value is created in this kind of project, that is enough.
Absolutely, yeah. So it adds up in different other ways, if not financially. And yeah, it is strenuous during that particular moment, but it always pays back. So, yeah.
You mentioned about a lot of collaborations happening over all these projects. With collaboration, there also comes a word which is parallel to it. It's negotiations. What is the art to it? What is the mind to it in negotiating with policymakers of people of various end users? How do you do that so that the architecture falls in the gray space where it's made, it's well done? So how do you do that? The negotiation part, which can be financial, which can be putting up your art, which can be convincing. How do you do that?
Again, we are learning. I would say all of us try and look at it with a different perspective. There's this idea of enrollment versus negotiation. So the intent always is to be on the same side of the table and build towards that. So first, create a listening. So for the client, create a listening that we are actually safeguarding his larger interest. We are holding the intent for the larger interest of what he's looking at, or anybody who's on the opposite side in that sense. And then navigating through to make sure that there is a certain give and take that's possible, and bringing the person in alignment. So alignment is the toughest exercise. I'm with you on that, but that's something that we believe that brings the most value to our projects, and we spend a lot of energy. So within the team, within ourselves, making sure that we are aligned to what we are pursuing. So that's one of the things. Even that's why I spoke about these 8 core inquiries that we are up to, because as a studio, we are really interested in holding that. So making sure that everybody sees that, understands that. So over the years, it's been very intuitive for us, as the practice grew. But now we've started articulating it. And yeah, these are the tools we bring forth to ask questions and bring alignment.
By the way, we're planning our next honeymoon to Rajasthan.
Sir, thank you so much for sharing your projects. These are amazing study as well. I just wanted to ask, how do you manage to decide what all old carvings or structurally, how do you manage to retain the structure as well, in terms of structure as well and details as well? Because I know how critical it could be to retain a certain aesthetics and profile of the building. So how do you manage to do it with structure and as in terms of details as well, or motifs as well, while you are working in old buildings?
So I was having a conversation with somebody earlier. I'll say this idea of context in a larger sense, if I was not only look at a place or a site or a physical context, the idea of context also leads you to what value is it bringing in that context, and in some way we are always looking for that. So that's the reason why I said, do historical elements need to be retained for just for the sake of it and conservation? So we had a huge debate on that vestigial block that we removed in the for the Baradri project in the city palace, because the Mehrangarh Trust, everybody got engaged, the conservation architect got engaged with us, and we really kind of created a case for why that structure was not naturally attaching itself to the old architecture of the building. It was probably inserted because these buildings evolve over time, and it was actually a vestigial structure. The layers of artworks which were overlaid on the painted walls were not matching up to any benchmark of the artisans that had worked in the palace. So you looked at the other parts of the palace and we realized these drawings were really of poor quality, which they had commissioned to somebody had not thought it through, and it had landed in that place. So we were able to talk about what value it is bringing to that space today, and taking it to the future, whether it was relevant or not relevant, and then pushing for that case. And that's the only way to make a decision, right? So the idea always is to pinpoint the value that you're being able to bring to the project or to the larger intent of whatever you're up to. Yeah.
Thank you.